The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Martinez stepped out of her civilian vehicle. At 28, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore simple jeans and a fitted jacket, nothing that would immediately signal her extraordinary background to the dozens of uniformed personnel moving across the base. Sarah had arrived at Fort Braxton for what many considered an impossible task. As a former Olympic shooting competitor turned private military contractor, she had been hired by the Department of Defense to evaluate and potentially improve the marksmanship training protocols used across all military branches. It was a prestigious assignment, but one that came with significant skepticism from the military establishment. The resistance began almost immediately. As Sarah walked toward the main administrative building, she could feel the weight of curious and dismissive stares. Whispered conversations followed in her wake. Here was a civilian woman, barely past her mid-20s, coming to tell some of the most elite soldiers in the world how to shoot better. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all on Colonel Marcus Thompson. Colonel Thompson had commanded special operations units for over 2 decades. His weathered face told stories of deployments across 3 different continents, and his chest displayed ribbons earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication to military excellence. When he first received the memo about Sarah's assignment, he had crumpled it up and thrown it in the trash. Only a direct order from his commanding general had forced him to retrieve it and begrudgingly accept the evaluation. The initial meeting took place in Colonel Thompson's office, a sparse room decorated only with unit citations and photos of fallen comrades. Sarah entered to find the colonel seated behind his desk, flanked by 2 other senior officers. Major Williams, the base's head of marksmanship training, sat to his right, while Sergeant Major Rodriguez, a veteran with over 15 years of special operations experience, occupied the chair to his left. Miss Martinez, Colonel Thompson began, deliberately avoiding any honorific that might suggest respect for her expertise. I'm going to be direct with you. This base trains some of the finest shooters in the world. My men have earned their marksmanship badges in combat, not at some sporting event with perfect conditions and unlimited time. Sarah remained calm, accustomed to this type of reception. She had faced similar skepticism throughout her career, from Olympic trials where male competitors questioned her presence to private security contracts where clients initially doubted her capabilities. "I understand your concerns, Colonel," she replied evenly. "I'm not here to replace your training methods. I'm here to observe, learn, and potentially identify areas where small adjustments might yield significant improvements in accuracy and consistency." Major Williams leaned forward, his voice carrying a hint of condescension. "With all due respect, ma'am, there's a significant difference between target shooting and combat marksmanship. Our soldiers need to hit targets while under stress with limited ammunition, and often in less than ideal conditions. Olympic shooting doesn't exactly prepare someone for those realities." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right, Major. Combat shooting involves variables that competitive shooting doesn't address. However, the fundamental principles of accuracy, breathing control, trigger discipline, and sight alignment remain constant regardless of the environment. If we can perfect those basics, soldiers will perform better under any conditions." Sergeant Major Rodriguez spoke up, his tone skeptical, but not entirely dismissive. "What exactly do you propose to evaluate, Miss Martinez? Our current qualification standards are already among the most rigorous in any military force. I'd like to observe your current training protocols, review qualification scores and improvement rates, and then work with a volunteer group to test some modified techniques," Sarah explained. "The goal isn't to revolutionize your system, but to see if we can enhance it in meaningful ways." Colonel Thompson leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah intently. Something about her demeanor impressed him despite his reservations. She wasn't arrogant or dismissive of military expertise. Instead, she spoke with the confidence of someone who truly understood her craft and respected the challenges faced by military personnel. "Fine," he said finally. "You'll have access to observe our training for 1 week. After that, if you think you can actually contribute something valuable, we'll arrange a demonstration. But I'm warning you now, my soldiers won't be impressed by fancy techniques that only work on a perfect range." "I wouldn't expect them to be," Sarah replied. "Real improvement speaks for itself." The colonel's expression hardened slightly. "Let me be clear about something, Miss Martinez. Tomorrow morning, my Navy SEAL team is conducting their quarterly qualification. These are men who have completed some of the most demanding military training in the world. They've earned their reputation through years of dedication and countless hours of practice. If you think you can waltz in here and outperform them, you're in for a rude awakening." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I'm not here to compete with your men, Colonel. I'm here to help improve training effectiveness." Nevertheless, Colonel Thompson continued, "If you're going to evaluate our methods, you should understand the standard you're working with. I invite you to observe tomorrow's qualification. Better yet, why don't you participate? Show us what Olympic-level shooting looks like compared to military precision." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a fired rifle. Major Williams and Sergeant Major Rodriguez exchanged glances, both recognizing the colonel's tactical maneuver. He was putting Sarah in an impossible position: either decline and appear to lack confidence in her abilities, or accept and likely fail against some of the most skilled shooters in the military. Sarah considered the offer carefully. She knew it was designed to embarrass her, to put her in her place before she could begin her actual evaluation work. However, she also recognized an opportunity. If she could demonstrate real skill, it might earn her the respect necessary to make meaningful improvements to their training program. "I accept your invitation, Colonel," she said quietly. "What time should I report to the range?" Colonel Thompson's smile was predatory. "Oh, 600 hours, Miss Martinez. Bring your own weapon if you prefer. Our qualification course involves multiple firing positions, varying distances, and time constraints. I trust you're familiar with tactical shooting scenarios." "I've had some exposure to tactical disciplines," Sarah replied modestly, not elaborating on her extensive training with various law enforcement and private military organizations. As the meeting concluded, Colonel Thompson felt satisfied with his maneuvering. Tomorrow morning would put an end to this civilian evaluation nonsense. His SEALs would demonstrate the difference between real military shooting and competitive sport, and Miss Martinez would hopefully recognize the futility of her assignment. Sarah left the office knowing exactly what Colonel Thompson intended. She had faced similar tests throughout her career, situations designed to prove she didn't belong. The difference now was the stakes involved. This wasn't just about personal pride or career advancement. The training improvements she hoped to implement could potentially save soldiers' lives in combat situations. That evening, Sarah spent time at the base's indoor range, familiarizing herself with the facilities and reviewing the qualification course requirements. The course was indeed challenging, involving precision shooting at various distances, rapid-fire sequences, and shooting from multiple positions including prone, kneeling, and standing. Time limits added pressure, and the scoring system rewarded both accuracy and speed. As she practiced, Sarah reflected on her journey to this moment. Her Olympic experience had taught her the importance of mental discipline and technical precision. Her subsequent work with law enforcement tactical teams had introduced her to combat shooting principles. Years of private security contracts had given her real-world experience with weapons handling under stress. The combination of these experiences had led to her current expertise in marksmanship training methodology. She had developed techniques that bridged the gap between competitive accuracy and tactical effectiveness, methods that improved both precision and performance under pressure. The next morning arrived with typical military punctuality. Sarah reported to the outdoor range at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying her custom rifle case and wearing appropriate range attire. She found Colonel Thompson waiting with his SEAL team, 12 men whose bearing and confidence immediately marked them as elite soldiers. The team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, stepped forward to introduce his men. Each SEAL was introduced with their specialization and years of service, an impressive roster of combat veterans and tactical experts. Sarah shook hands with each man, noting their professional courtesy despite obvious skepticism about her presence. "Gentlemen," Colonel Thompson announced, "Miss Martinez will be participating in today's qualification alongside your team. She's here to evaluate our marksmanship training. So let's show her what military precision looks like." The qualification course began with precision shooting at 300 meters. Each shooter had 10 rounds to place in a target zone roughly the size of a dinner plate. The SEALs performed admirably, with most achieving scores in the high 80s or low 90s out of a possible 100 points. Sarah approached the firing line with quiet concentration. She had chosen to use her competition rifle, a precision instrument that she knew intimately. As she settled into the prone position, she could feel the weight of multiple gazes upon her. Conversations had stopped, and the range felt unusually quiet. Her first shot rang out, followed immediately by a spotter's call of X-ring center. The second shot followed quickly, then the third. Sarah's breathing remained controlled, her trigger pulls consistent and deliberate. By the time she finished the 10-round string, the silence on the range had become absolute. "Perfect score," the range safety officer announced, his voice betraying surprise. 100 points, all shots in the X-ring. Colonel Thompson's expression tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Impressive shooting, Miss Martinez. However, this course involves more than just precision work. Let's see how you handle the tactical scenarios." The second stage involved rapid-fire shooting at multiple targets at varying distances, with a strict time limit that challenged even experienced shooters. The SEALs performed well, demonstrating the aggressive speed that tactical shooting demanded, though their scores showed the natural trade-off between speed and precision. Sarah approached this stage differently than the precision round. Her stance became more dynamic, her movement efficient but relaxed. When the buzzer sounded, she engaged targets with controlled urgency, her shots falling into a rhythm that seemed almost musical. Target after target received precise hits, and she finished with time to spare. Her score surpassed every SEAL on the range. The third and final stage proved most challenging for everyone. It involved shooting from various positions while moving between covered firing points, simulating tactical movement under pressure. Time constraints were severe, and targets appeared at unexpected distances and angles. The SEALs attacked this stage with typical military aggression, moving quickly and engaging targets with practiced efficiency. Their scores reflected both their tactical training and the inherent difficulty of shooting accurately while managing movement and time pressure. Sarah approached the final stage with the same calm concentration she had displayed throughout the qualification. Her movement between firing positions was economical, wasting no energy on unnecessary actions. At each firing point, she acquired targets quickly and delivered precise shots before moving to the next position. When the final buzzer sounded and scores were tallied, Sarah had achieved something unprecedented at Fort Braxton. She had not only outshot every member of the SEAL team, she had set a new facility record for the qualification course. The silence on the range stretched until Lieutenant Commander Jackson stepped forward and extended his hand to Sarah. "Outstanding shooting, ma'am. I've never seen anyone shoot that qualification course with that level of precision and speed." Colonel Thompson remained quiet, his mind processing what he had witnessed. This civilian woman had just outperformed his most elite soldiers on their own range, using a course designed to test combat shooting skills. His assumptions about her capabilities had been completely shattered. As the SEALs began packing their equipment, several approached Sarah with genuine respect and curiosity about her techniques. The atmosphere had shifted completely from skepticism to professional interest. These were men who recognized true skill when they witnessed it, regardless of its source. Sarah used the opportunity to begin informal discussions about shooting methodology, sharing insights about breathing techniques, sight alignment, and mental preparation that had contributed to her performance. The SEALs listened attentively, recognizing valuable information that could improve their own shooting. Colonel Thompson, finally, approached Sarah as she was securing her rifle case. His expression had changed from dismissive to thoughtfully respectful. "Miss Martinez," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your capabilities that were clearly unfounded. That was some of the finest shooting I've witnessed in over 20 years of military service." "Thank you, Colonel," Sarah replied. "Your men are excellent shooters. I'm hoping we can work together to help them become even better." The colonel nodded slowly. "I think that will be very beneficial. When can you begin working with our training cadre?" As Sarah walked away from the range that morning, she knew the real work was just beginning. Earning respect through demonstration was only the first step. Now she had to prove that her methods could be taught effectively and implemented across different skill levels and training programs. The shooting demonstration had opened doors, but transforming military marksmanship training would require patience, persistence, and the ability to work within established military culture while introducing meaningful improvements. The week following Sarah's demonstration transformed her status at Fort Braxton from unwelcome outsider to respected consultant. Word of her performance against the SEAL team spread throughout the base with typical military efficiency, and suddenly, officers who had previously dismissed her presence were requesting meetings to discuss marksmanship improvements for their units. Colonel Thompson scheduled daily briefings with Sarah, eager to understand how her methods could be integrated into existing training protocols. Major Williams, initially her harshest critic, became one of her most attentive students. The shift in attitude was dramatic and complete. Sarah began her systematic evaluation of the base's marksmanship training program by observing regular qualification sessions across different units. She watched infantry soldiers, military police, and support personnel as they attempted to meet minimum marksmanship standards. What she observed troubled her significantly. The current training approach emphasized volume of fire over precision development. Soldiers fired hundreds of rounds during training sessions, but many struggled with fundamental techniques that affected their accuracy. Breathing control was inconsistent, trigger discipline was poor among many shooters, and sight alignment errors were common throughout most units. More concerning was the approach to instruction. Range instructors focused primarily on safety protocols and basic procedures, but provided limited individual coaching on technique improvement. Soldiers who struggled with marksmanship received minimal personalized attention, often repeatedly failing qualifications without understanding why their accuracy remained poor. Sarah documented these observations carefully, developing specific recommendations for training modifications that could address the systematic issues she identified. Her approach focused on building stronger foundations and shooting fundamentals before advancing to more complex tactical shooting scenarios. The first major change Sarah proposed involved restructuring the basic marksmanship instruction program. Instead of immediately progressing to live fire exercises, she recommended extensive dry fire training that would allow soldiers to develop proper muscle memory and technique without the distraction of recoil and muzzle blast. Dry fire training allows shooters to focus purely on the fundamentals, Sarah explained to Colonel Thompson during one of their morning briefings. Trigger control, sight alignment, breathing coordination, and follow-through can all be practiced and perfected without ammunition costs or range time limitations. Colonel Thompson was initially skeptical. "My soldiers need to be comfortable with actual gunfire, Miss Martinez. Combat doesn't involve dry firing at the enemy." "Absolutely true," Sarah agreed. "But soldiers who master the fundamentals through dry fire practice will perform significantly better when live ammunition is introduced. The muscle memory and techniques they develop will transfer directly to combat shooting situations." To prove her point, Sarah requested permission to work with a group of soldiers who had recently failed their marksmanship qualifications. These were men and women who struggled consistently with shooting accuracy, often requiring multiple attempts to meet minimum standards. The test group consisted of 15 soldiers from various units, all of whom had failed at least 2 qualification attempts in the past 6 months. Their frustration with marksmanship training was evident, and several had requested transfers to positions that didn't require regular weapons qualifications. Sarah began working with this group, using her modified training approach. Instead of immediately heading to the firing line, she spent the first 3 days in a classroom environment, teaching shooting theory and conducting extensive dry fire exercises. Marksmanship is fundamentally about consistency, Sarah explained to the group. Every successful shot requires the same sight picture, the same trigger press, the same breathing pattern, and the same follow-through. We're going to practice these elements until they become automatic. The dry fire training sessions were intensive and detailed. Sarah worked individually with each soldier, correcting stance issues, grip problems, and sight alignment errors. She taught breathing techniques that would work under stress and trigger control methods that eliminated common accuracy problems. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, a supply specialist who had failed 4 qualification attempts, was initially skeptical of the dry fire approach. "Ma'am, I've been shooting for 2 years, and I still can't hit the broadside of a barn. How is pretending to shoot going to help me?" Sarah worked with Sergeant Gonzalez individually, identifying several fundamental problems with her shooting technique. Her grip was inconsistent, her breathing pattern disrupted her sight alignment, and her trigger finger placement caused shots to pull consistently to the left. "Watch your sight picture as you press the trigger," Sarah instructed. "The front sight should remain perfectly centered in the rear sight notch throughout the entire trigger press. Any movement indicates a problem with your technique." Through patient repetition and constant correction, Sergeant Gonzalez began to develop proper shooting fundamentals. Her dry fire practice sessions showed steady improvement in consistency and technique. More importantly, her confidence began to return as she understood why her previous attempts had failed. The same pattern repeated with other members of the struggling shooter group. Individual attention revealed specific technical problems that had never been addressed in previous training. Sarah's systematic approach to fundamentals provided these soldiers with tools they had never possessed. After 3 days of intensive dry fire training, Sarah introduced live ammunition exercises. However, instead of jumping immediately into qualification courses, she began with carefully controlled precision shooting at close ranges. The goal was to demonstrate to each soldier that proper technique produced immediate accuracy improvements. The results were remarkable. Soldiers who had struggled to hit target areas at standard qualification distances were placing shots consistently in tight groups at closer ranges. The connection between proper technique and accuracy became immediately obvious to everyone in the group. Sergeant Gonzalez fired her first perfect group during the initial live fire session, placing 5 shots within a 2-inch circle at 25 meters. She stared at the target in disbelief before turning to Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I did that," she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "I actually shot that group." "You did that," Sarah confirmed. "You applied proper technique consistently, and the target shows the result. This is what you're capable of when you eliminate the technical errors that were affecting your accuracy." Word of the dramatic improvements spread quickly throughout the base. Other instructors began observing Sarah's training sessions, eager to understand methods that could transform struggling shooters into competent marksmen in a matter of days. Major Williams requested permission to implement Sarah's modified training approach with his advanced marksmanship instructors. "If these methods can help soldiers who've been failing qualifications, imagine what they could do for our already competent shooters," he argued to Colonel Thompson. The colonel authorized expanded implementation of Sarah's training modifications across multiple units. However, he also insisted on rigorous documentation and measurement of results to ensure the improvements were genuine and sustainable. Sarah worked with the base's training cadre to develop standardized lesson plans, incorporating her methodologies. The new approach began with extensive fundamental skills development through dry fire practice, progressed through controlled live-fire exercises, building confidence and technique, and culminated in tactical shooting scenarios that tested skills under realistic stress. The transformation in training results was dramatic and measurable. Units implementing Sarah's modified approach showed qualification pass rates that improved by over 40%. Average qualification scores increased significantly, and soldiers who had previously struggled with marksmanship began achieving scores that exceeded previous base standards. More importantly, the improvements appeared to be sustainable. Follow-up evaluations conducted weeks after initial training showed that soldiers retained the techniques they had learned and continued to shoot at improved levels during subsequent qualification attempts. Lieutenant Commander Jackson requested that Sarah work directly with his SEAL team to refine their already excellent shooting skills. "You've demonstrated that your methods can help struggling shooters," he explained. "I want to see what they can do for shooters who are already performing at high levels." Sarah welcomed the opportunity to work with elite shooters who could fully appreciate subtle technical improvements. The SEALs proved to be exceptional students, quickly grasping advanced concepts and implementing refinements that enhanced their already impressive capabilities. The work with the SEAL team focused on optimization rather than fundamental correction. Sarah introduced advanced breathing techniques that improved stability under stress, refined trigger control methods that enhanced precision during rapid-fire sequences, and taught mental preparation strategies that maintained focus during extended shooting sessions. Chief Petty Officer Roberts, the team's designated marksman, achieved new personal records during training sessions implementing Sarah's advanced techniques. "I've been shooting professionally for 12 years, he told Sarah, "and I just shot the best groups of my career." These methods work at every skill level. As news of the training improvements spread beyond Fort Braxton, Sarah received requests from other military installations interested in implementing her methodologies. The Department of Defense began discussing system-wide adoption of her training modifications across all branches of service. Colonel Thompson found himself in the unusual position of defending a civilian consultant's work to skeptical peers from other installations. "I was initially as doubtful as anyone," he admitted during a conference call with other base commanders. "But the results speak for themselves. Our qualification pass rates have improved dramatically, and our average scores are the highest they've been in over a decade." The success at Fort Braxton generated interest from unexpected sources. Law enforcement agencies began inquiring about Sarah's training methods for their firearms instruction programs. Private security companies requested consultations to improve their personnel's shooting capabilities. International military forces expressed interest in adopting her systematic approach to marksmanship development. Sarah recognized that the success at Fort Braxton represented only the beginning of a much larger transformation in how shooting skills were taught and developed. Her methods had proven effective across different skill levels and various types of shooters, suggesting broader applications than she had initially anticipated. However, she also understood the challenges involved in implementing change across large, established organizations. Military culture valued tradition and proven methods, making innovations difficult to introduce even when they demonstrated clear advantages. The key to successful implementation, Sarah realized, was working within existing structures rather than attempting to revolutionize them completely. Her modifications enhanced current training approaches rather than replacing them entirely, making adoption easier for instructors and more acceptable to military leadership. As her time at Fort Braxton extended beyond the original evaluation period, Sarah developed comprehensive training manuals and instructor guides that would allow other bases to implement her methods independently. The documentation process ensured that improvements could be sustained and replicated without her direct involvement. The transformation of Fort Braxton's marksmanship program had exceeded everyone's expectations, including Sarah's own. What began as a simple evaluation assignment had evolved into a comprehensive reform of military shooting instruction with implications extending far beyond a single installation. 6 months after Sarah's initial demonstration at Fort Braxton, The base had become a model installation for military marksmanship training. Officers from other facilities made regular visits to observe the transformed training programs and learn implementation strategies for their own units. The success story had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. General Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of the Army's Training and Doctrine Command, arrived at Fort Braxton for a comprehensive evaluation of Sarah's methodologies. The general's visit represented a crucial moment for potential system-wide adoption of the training improvements across all Army installations. Colonel Thompson personally briefed General Hayes on the transformation that had occurred under Sarah's guidance. The statistics were impressive and undeniable. Qualification pass rates had improved by 52% across all units. Average qualification scores had increased by 38 points. Most significantly, soldiers who had previously struggled with marksmanship were now achieving scores that exceeded previous installation records. The improvements aren't just statistical, Colonel Thompson explained to General Hayes. We've seen fundamental changes in how our soldiers approach shooting. They understand the technical aspects of marksmanship in ways they never did before, and that knowledge translates into consistent performance under various conditions. General Hayes observed training sessions across multiple units, watching Sarah work with both struggling shooters and advanced marksmen. The general was particularly impressed by the systematic approach to instruction and the dramatic improvements demonstrated by soldiers who had previously failed multiple qualification attempts. Sergeant Gonzalez, the supplies specialist who had once struggled with basic marksmanship, now served as a peer instructor, helping other soldiers develop proper shooting fundamentals. Her transformation from failing shooter to teaching assistant exemplified the broader changes that had occurred throughout the base. 6 months ago, I couldn't hit a target consistently at 50 meters, Sergeant Gonzalez explained to General Hayes. Today, I'm teaching other soldiers techniques that have helped them achieve the same improvements I experienced. The methods work because they address the actual technical problems that cause poor shooting. The general observed a qualification session involving soldiers from various units, including some who were attempting the course for the first time. The pass rate for this session exceeded 90%, with average scores significantly higher than previous base standards. More importantly, the soldiers demonstrated confidence and competence that reflected genuine skill development rather than temporary improvement. Following her observations, General Hayes met privately with Sarah to discuss the broader implications of her work. The general was interested in understanding how the training improvements could be scaled across the entire Army while maintaining quality and consistency. Your results at Fort Braxton are impressive, General Hayes began. However, I need to understand whether these improvements can be replicated at other installations with different personnel, facilities, and existing training cultures. Sarah had anticipated this concern and prepared comprehensive documentation addressing implementation challenges. The fundamental techniques can be taught to any qualified instructor, she explained. The key is providing proper training for the instructors themselves and ensuring they understand not just what to teach, but why these methods work. The general reviewed Sarah's instructor development program, which included detailed training protocols for range safety officers, marksmanship instructors, and unit leaders responsible for weapons training. The program emphasized understanding shooting theory and diagnostic techniques that would allow instructors to identify and correct individual shooter problems. The traditional approach to marksmanship instruction focused primarily on safety and basic procedures, Sarah continued. While those elements remain crucial, we've added systematic technical instruction that gives soldiers the tools they need to diagnose and improve their own shooting performance. General Hayes was particularly interested in the economic implications of the training improvements. Better qualified soldiers reduced training costs through decreased ammunition consumption during remedial instruction. Improved pass rates meant fewer soldiers requiring multiple qualification attempts, saving time and resources across all training cycles. The data Sarah presented was compelling from both performance and fiscal perspectives. Installations implementing her methodologies showed reduced training costs despite improved outcomes. The initial investment in instructor training and modified protocols was offset quickly by savings in ammunition, range time, and personnel costs associated with remedial training. During her visit, General Hayes also met with soldiers from various units to hear their perspectives on the training changes. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with soldiers reporting increased confidence, better understanding of shooting fundamentals, and improved performance in their military occupational specialties requiring marksmanship skills. Private Chun, a recent recruit who had completed basic training using Sarah's modified approach, provided perspective on the new methods compared to traditional instruction. The systematic approach helped me understand why certain techniques work, he explained. Instead of just being told to do something, I learned the reasoning behind each technique, which made it easier to apply them consistently. The young soldier's comments reflected a broader shift in how marksmanship was taught and learned throughout the military. Sarah's approach emphasized understanding over rote memorization, giving soldiers knowledge they could apply independently rather than just following instructions without comprehension. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's SEAL team demonstrated advanced applications of Sarah's methodologies for General Hayes. The team's performance levels had improved even from their already impressive baseline, with several team members achieving personal records during tactical shooting scenarios. The advanced techniques enhanced our capabilities in ways I didn't expect, Lieutenant Commander Jackson explained. We were already competent shooters, but Ms. Martinez's methods gave us tools to optimize our performance under specific conditions we encounter during operations. The SEAL demonstration included precision shooting at extended ranges, rapid engagement of multiple targets, and shooting while wearing full combat equipment. In every scenario, the team demonstrated accuracy and consistency that exceeded their previous capabilities. General Hayes was particularly impressed by the team's ability to maintain precision during high-stress scenarios designed to simulate combat conditions. The advanced breathing and mental preparation techniques Sarah had taught them proved effective even when physical and psychological pressure was deliberately increased. Following her comprehensive evaluation, General Hayes met with Sarah and Colonel Thompson to discuss implementation plans for Army-wide adoption of the modified training approach. The general had been convinced by both the demonstrated results and the systematic nature of Sarah's methodologies. I want to implement these training improvements across all Army installations, General Hayes announced. However, I need your help developing a training program for our instructor cadre that will ensure consistent implementation and maintain quality standards. Sarah accepted the challenge of developing a comprehensive instructor certification program that would prepare military personnel to teach her methodologies effectively. The program would need to address not only technical instruction, but also the cultural changes required to shift from traditional volume-based training to precision-focused skill development. The instructor certification program Sarah developed was intensive and thorough. Candidates completed classroom instruction in shooting theory, hands-on training in diagnostic techniques, and practical teaching exercises that tested their ability to identify and correct shooter problems. The program culminated in a certification process that ensured instructors could maintain the high standards Sarah had established. Master Sergeant Williams, now a convert to Sarah's methods, became one of the first instructor candidates to complete the certification program. His transformation from skeptic to advocate represented the broader changes occurring throughout military training culture. I've been teaching marksmanship for 15 years, Master Sergeant Williams explained to Sarah. I thought I understood shooting instruction until I learned your systematic approach. Now I realize I was just going through the motions without really understanding how to help individual soldiers improve their specific problems. The certified instructor program began expanding to other installations, with Fort Braxton serving as the initial training center for instructor candidates from bases across the country. Sarah worked closely with each group, ensuring they understood both the technical aspects of her methods and the teaching approaches that made them effective. As the program expanded, Sarah received recognition from various military and civilian organizations for her contributions to military training effectiveness. However, she remained focused on the practical aspects of implementation rather than personal accolades. The transformation at Fort Braxton had demonstrated that significant improvements in military capabilities could be achieved through systematic approaches to skill development. Sarah's work proved that even well-established training programs could be enhanced when traditional methods were combined with innovative teaching strategies. Colonel Thompson, initially Sarah's harshest critic, became one of her strongest advocates within military leadership circles. He spoke at conferences and training seminars about the importance of remaining open to new ideas, regardless of their source. Pride and tradition are important in military culture, Colonel Thompson reflected. But they should never prevent us from adopting improvements that enhance our soldiers' capabilities and potentially save lives. Ms. Martinez taught us that expertise comes in many forms, and recognizing it requires setting aside preconceived notions. The success of Sarah's marksmanship training improvements led to requests for her expertise in other military training areas. Special operations units sought her consultation on advanced shooting techniques. Military academies invited her to speak about systematic approaches to skill development. International allied forces requested training partnerships to implement similar improvements in their own military training programs. Sarah's influence extended beyond military applications as her methods were adapted for law enforcement training, competitive shooting instruction, and civilian marksmanship education. The fundamental principles she had developed for military application proved effective across various shooting disciplines and skill levels. The woman who had walked onto Fort Braxton as an unwelcome outsider had transformed military marksmanship training through a combination of technical expertise, systematic thinking, and patient dedication to excellence. Her legacy extended far beyond improved qualification scores to include a fundamental shift in how shooting skills were taught, learned, and maintained throughout the military. Years later, soldiers completing basic training would learn marksmanship using methods Sarah had developed, though most would never know the story of how a civilian woman had once silenced the doubters on a military range and revolutionized military shooting instruction. Her techniques had become standard practice, seamlessly integrated into military training culture. The transformation at Fort Braxton served as proof that excellence recognizes no boundaries of gender, background, or traditional expectations. Sarah Martinez had demonstrated that true expertise demands respect regardless of its source, and that the willingness to learn and improve remains the foundation of all military excellence. Colonel Thompson kept a framed photograph from that first qualification session on his office wall, showing Sarah surrounded by the SEAL team members who had become her first students and advocates. The image served as a reminder that assumptions about capability could be dangerous, and that the greatest military virtue remained the humility to learn from anyone who could make soldiers more effective in their service to their country. The revolution in military marksmanship training had begun with a single demonstration of skill and evolved into comprehensive reform that improved capabilities across all branches of service. Sarah's legacy lived on in every soldier who learned to shoot using her methods, in every life potentially saved by improved marksmanship capabilities, and in the continuing tradition of military excellence that embraced improvement regardless of its source.